Welcome to the Friends of Fantasy Benefits Baseball Podcast. I'm Justin Mason, lead fantasy writer and analyst at friendsoffantasybenefits.com. Joining me on this episode is Joe Orrico of FWFB. Joe, welcome to the show.
Justin, like we were saying, long time no see. I hope you've been doing well all these months since we've talked with each other. No, I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me here, man. Talking about the Blue Jays is sometimes my favorite thing to do. Sometimes I hate doing it, but I think we're looking pretty good right now, so it should be fun.
Yeah, it's a really, really good team. They made playoffs last year. I think they're going to compete for a World Series this year. So I'm really excited for you and for any Blue Jay fans out there. I'll remind everybody where you can reach the social media and plug all your work.
Yes, you guys can find me over on Twitter. I'm at Joe Orrico99. You can follow along with I'm at Sports Ethos. I'm the head of baseball over there as well. You can follow along with our different content at Ethos Fantasy BB on Twitter, also at sportsethos.com. That's where all of our podcast links, article links, different news and notes get sent out through. Check out sportsethos.com, though. That's where all of our stuff is, all 4 major sports coverage, gambling. We got everything going on over there. So check out all of my work at sportsethos.com. Really, you can find it all from there.
All right. Definitely go do that. And if you like Joe, I just had him on the Sleeper in the Bus. So definitely go check him out over there. I talked about some sophomore players. But today is all about the Blue Jays. Let's start with the catching situation, where unlike other teams, there's not just one good catcher on this team. There's 2 so good that they traded away a top prospect at the catching position. Let's start with Alejandro Kirk, who I think is one of those guys that maybe people are still sleeping on for some weird reason. Where are you at on Alejandro Kirk?
I love Alejandro Kirk. I think that he is still underrated, despite the fact that I think he was more properly rated last season as opposed to what people were kind of thinking of him. He doesn't look typically like, and I love him. I want to preface it by saying I love Alejandro Kirk. He doesn't look like your typical major league player. He's a big, short dude. I think he's like 5'8". He's a heavy guy, but he is just so poised in the batter's box. Like, he walks nearly as much as he strikes out. He's going to hit you some home runs, which will probably be in like the 15 to 20 range. And he's going to have those counting stats. Like, he should probably be somewhere in the middle of the Blue Jays lineup. He's projected to bat 4th. I think that he could bat 4th or 5th, depending on the day. But the guys in front of him, excellent. Springer, Bichette, and Guerrero. And then right after him, you got Varsho, Chapman, Brandon Belt. Like, he's not going to lack for counting stats. His own profile, regardless of anybody else, is borderline elite. He's one of the only catchers in baseball who is capable of hitting for 300 like over the course of an entire season. And if you look at ATC projections, he has the second highest projected WRC plus on the Blue Jays. Only Vladimir Guerrero is projected to go higher. He's ahead of Springer, Bichette, Chapman, all the rest of them. So he is elite offensively, and I think that people are going to start to really see that this season. Another year of comfortability with him. I love him, and I love the draft price too. Like, he's going after pick 100 pretty consistently, and I think that for me personally, he's my number 4 catcher for the season. I love him. I'd be trying to get him wherever you can because the price is just so good.
Completely agree. What about Danny Jansen, a guy who took a step forward? I think we've been waiting on him for a little while, and it seems like coming into his own. Where are you at on Danny Jansen?
Projections for him are incredible too. 20 home runs he's expected to get in only 111 games. His WRC plus is projected to be 120. Like, no slouch in his own right. And it's funny, most teams are trying to find one catcher to throw out there. The Jays have 2, arguably 3 guys they could throw out there behind the plate. And Danny Jansen, I think he's going to suffer a little bit in terms of at-bats, especially since Brandon Belt came to town. There may be some DH at-bats that he ends up losing. But when he's out there, he's still going to be an elite bat. And he has been whenever he's played. It's just the fact that we haven't seen him give you a full season worth of production really ever. Like, there was one year where he got over 100 games. It was 107. But we don't really know the full potential of Danny Jansen over, let's say, 120, 125 games. If he does play that, then I think the projections are very correct. Like, the Bat X has him for 23 homers, 66 ribbies, and a 234 batting average. I think that's about what you can expect from him. And I think that you should be pretty interested. His price isn't that expensive either, 183. I wouldn't really want him as my first catcher necessarily, but I don't think you could be faulted for it either. I think you could make that argument. I believe he was 13th in my catcher rankings. I really like him. And the fact that there is no Gabriel Moreno to compete for at bats, because that was going to be a problem potentially if Moreno did, progress well. And Moreno's very good. I know a lot of people didn't like him, but he batted 320 in his short stretch of the majors. Like, I think they were going to give him more time. So it definitely is a positive that he's gone. It takes away from that a little bit, the fact that Brandon Belt's there. But I think overall you can still expect 110-ish games, 20-ish home runs. Like, I think the projections are pretty spot on for Danny Jansen for this year.
Yeah, I like Jansen a lot. I think especially if you don't want to take one of the elite options at catcher, he's a really, really nice fallback plan as kind of a high-end C2 or a low-end C1.
Yeah.
Let's talk about an elite guy, right? And it is Vladimir Guerrero Jr. Coming off a quote-unquote down season. I don't know. Like, I mean, dude was just, awesome. My projections have him as like a top 5 player in fantasy this year. He is not going there. Where are you at on Vladimir Guerrero Jr.?
He's my number one first baseman. I think that he is the number one first baseman, fantasy or real life baseball. I couldn't be higher on him. Like you said, down season with 32 homers, 97 ribbies. He batted 274. He stole 8 bases too. I mean, I don't know how sticky that's going to be year in and year out, but the potential is there. And it's not really, he's quick, but he just wants to steal those bases. Like, a lot of the time, he'll go and you see like a quizzical look from the dugout as if like, why is he going? But he will just go without being told. And that's something that could play for fantasy. It doesn't have to be a ton of stolen bases. The first base position, you're not getting a ton of steals really from anybody. He could give you like anywhere between 5 and 10, and I wouldn't be surprised. And that's just the cherry on top of what he's already going to give you at the plate, because 32 homers and 97 RBIs, that could be like the worst season we see from him in his 20s. It is really possible that is the low point for Guerrero since he, had that breakout in 2021. I fully expect him to get back to 40 homers. The counting stats, he should give you 200 runs and RBIs put together, and another guy who is likely to bat 300. I couldn't be higher on him. And I know I'm going to be a little bit biased. Whenever you're doing a team preview, you're talking to somebody who's a fan of the team, there is going to be a hint of bias there. But, objectively speaking, we're talking about he's still 23 years old. And he's already this good. So I think the sky is the absolute limit with Vlad Guerrero.
I mean, he's had back-to-back seasons in which he has put up pretty much 700 plate appearances, 706 last year and 798 the year before. There just aren't very many guys who put up that amount of plate appearances while still giving you, potentially a 300 batting average, plus all the other counting categories and the weird speed. Like you said, I think a lot of those stolen bases were kind of situational. You look at kind of where he stole those bases, and they were a lot of them were against the same teams. And so you wonder, like, hey, did the team just go, hey, this pitcher is really slow to the plate, or this catcher really sucks? Feel free to take advantage if you see a good opportunity. And so, I don't know how sticky those are year to year, but I love Vlad Guerrero Jr. He's gonna be a lot of my teams this
year. Yeah, price is very reasonable. Like end of the first, beginning of the second round, I'll have a lot of shares.
Yeah, I will too. Whit Merrifield seems like he's going to play the majority of his games at second base this year, but we did see kind of a drop off in terms of his fantasy value when he came over from Kansas City. Where are you at on Whit Merrifield?
I like him. I think I like him a lot because the price is fairly reasonable at this point. We don't have to pay that premium that we had in prior years. Now, he's not giving you the same production he gave you in prior years, but he's going after pick 200 or around pick 200 at this point. So I think it's fairly reasonable. He's projected to bat, I believe it's 8th in the lineup right now. I think that might move around depending on how healthy George Springer is, which is a question that maybe we'll talk about a little bit later. I think that we could see Whit Merrifield lead off some days if Springer's out of the lineup. That will boost his value a little bit as well. And I don't think we're fully out of the range of fantasy relevance with Whit Merrifield, the way that the price is kind of suggesting that he's kind of a bit of an afterthought. He's at a terrible position in second base where, he's one of the last guys, I'm just going to pull up my rankings real quick, where I would be comfortable having him as my number one second baseman. I think that you could make that argument for him pretty easily. I mean, maybe you won't be that comfortable with it, but he's still going to give you probably double-digit home runs. He's going to give you anywhere from 20-ish steals to like 25. He's projected for only anywhere from 16 to 19. But that feels a little bit low. Like, I think that we could probably see him, maybe not give you a 40 steal season again, but I think that we could see, especially with John Schneider, the way that he is a little bit more aggressive than the Blue Jays were under Charlie Montoyo. I would not at all be surprised to see him give you somewhere in the 20-ish stolen base range. So I'm definitely not out on him. I think that there is I know a little bit of skepticism, maybe because he is older. It's a different team. It's a different ballpark, whatever. But he's still fairly young, 33 years old. I just turned 34 a couple days ago. He can still run. He can still hit for power. He can still give you those counting stats. And he's fairly inexpensive at a position where, it gets ugly pretty quick. So let's just pull up second baseman here. He's going, I believe, as the 16th second baseman off the board. I'd be pretty comfortable having him as my SB SB1 heading into the season. Like not my favorite target, but if you end up there with him in your starting lineup, I don't think you're going to get hurt too badly by it.
Yeah, the only problem with Merrifield, I think, is once he came to Toronto, he pretty much stopped running. He only attempted 3 stolen bases, only actually successfully had 1 stolen base. And you really need him to steal those bases to have that value because there isn't a ton of power in the bat. I do think there is a realistic shot that he is batting towards the bottom of that lineup.
Yeah.
And so you do just wonder, like, how much are they going to let him run? How much, how RBIs and runs scored, like, how much do we really see from him? I think his days of being a fantasy stud are clearly over. I still think he's useful because, like you said, he's dual eligible at second base and the outfield, which are like the two of the shallowest positions in fantasy this year. So like he will have value. He's probably not going to end up on many of my teams, unfortunately.
I just think, the steals are definitely something to consider, but over the course of a full season at the bottom of the lineup, I don't think that they're going to hold him back from stealing. If he's batting 8th or 9th, if he gets on base to start an inning and you're turning it over to a Springer or whatever, I don't think that they're going to hold him back necessarily. It's definitely something to consider, and you're right. He's no longer that fantasy stud, like even what we saw in 2021. I don't think we're going to get back there. It's all really the steals. But I think we could see 20. I think 20 is realistic. And at that price, past pick 200, or even if he creeps inside of the top 200, depending on what filters you use, maybe he is going inside the top 200 right now. But I think that there is a lot of value just because of that, because the market did adjust fairly quickly to him. There's not like, he should still be going in the top 75 because we know what he can do. And like they adjusted pretty reasonably, knocking his price down. Like even last year, I think he was a early 3rd round pick, mid 3rd round pick. Mm-hmm. You're getting him, 10, close to 10 rounds later, 8 rounds later than you were last year. And that's where I'm in on him. Like just the skill set alone, I think that he could make some noise potentially. I think those home runs are going to be there. Maybe the counting stats aren't crazy. I think he should still score runs. Maybe the RBIs are where he suffers the most at the bottom of that lineup. Because if he's batting 9th and he gets on base, Springer, Bichette, and Guerrero will drive him in. He's got the speed to score from first on a ball in the gap. I think the steals are the biggest question. Whether he's going to be a 10, 12 steal guy or a 25 steal guy will have a big determination on his value.
All right, let's talk about Bo Bichette, who, again, coming off a quote-unquote down season, but he made a change mid-season that really bolstered him up in the second half. Where are you at on Bo Bichette?
I'm pretty in on Bo Bichette still. I mean, like you said, it was a down year for him, which was kind of across the board, a bit of a down year for Blue Jays bats. Even they departed Teoscar Hernandez, Lourdes Gurriel Jr. They had some struggles this past season. Gurriel had like 5 home runs. Teoscar was a shadow of himself. Bichette, even though he struggled, his stat line at the end of the year ended up being pretty damn close to 2021. He was within 5 home runs. He was within 10 RBIs. He was within 10 batting average points. He lost 30 runs. That was a huge part of his losing value. Like he was a consensus top 5 pick heading into the year last season. And now we're seeing him go end of the first round. And right now he's going about pick 10 on average, sometimes a bit higher. Sometimes he might sneak into the second round, but he's still giving you pretty much the same production. The runs are something that's more team-based. It's not like, he was bad, so he didn't score as many runs. The team didn't score as many runs. I think the big thing with him is the stolen bases. And I think I heard you and Paul talking about it recently on Sleeper in the Bust is can he get back to 25? Is he going to be, a high teen steal guy? That's a huge question for him because he went from 25 to 13. And I think that an even bigger part of that was the amount of times he got caught stealing. He was 25 for 26 in 2021. This past season, he was 13 of 21. So less actual successful steals, fewer attempts. It's definitely a little bit of a concern. But I think over the course of an entire season under John Schneider, I think he wants to run a bit more. I think he is a bit more fun in that way where he will, let the guys run where maybe the book doesn't say you should run here. he is somebody where he might just send them. And I'm just looking at his steals down the stretch. They didn't really increase or decrease. They were kind of just, 3 in April, 1 in May, 1 in June, 2 in July. He had 4 in the last month of the season. I don't know that we're going to see him jump back up to 25, but I think even if he is an 18 to 20 steal guy, and I believe the projections are calling for 15 to 17, even if he gives you that, he's giving you 20 plus homers. He's going to give you 200 runs and RBIs put together, and he has the potential to bat 300. So I'm still fully in on him, and not to mention the lineup that he's in is excellent as well. So I'm still in on him at the end of the first round. I really am.
Yeah, I absolutely am too. I think, and he's a guy I've already targeted at the end of the first round. I think he has one of the safer floors in that kind of late first round. A guy that you're going to get a ton of plate appearances from. You're going to get power. You're going to get speed. I love the fact that he made a mechanical change in the second half and was just elite in the second half. Yeah, maybe he's not a 25 stolen base guy moving forward, but you never know. With larger bases, new pickoff rules, he could be end up being back as like a 20-25 stolen base guy fairly easily. I think a lot of it is determining whether the team wants him to run or not. So I love Bichette. I think he's a pretty easy, safe first round pick. What about Matt Chapman? He's a guy that I think you kind of know what you're going to get. You're going to get strikeouts, you're going to get power, and you're going to get pretty damn good defense, which means he's playing every day. Where are you at on Matt Chapman?
Oh, I'm in on Matt Chapman. I had him just pulling up the third base rankings, number 8. I'm in on him right now. I think the projections are really good. They're projecting more home runs across the board than what he had last year. The Bat X loves him. They're thinking 32 homers, 84 runs, 89 RBIs. The thing where you got to look at is the batting average, and it's not going to be good, right? He's had 1 year where he's ever batted over 250. He's probably not going to do that. He runs fairly low BABIPs. He's not a quick guy. He's probably going to be in the 220, 230 range. But you're getting a guy who is likely to bat 5th, 6th in that lineup. He could score, or he could have 100 RBIs, and it wouldn't surprise me. He could kind of have a season without the batting, like just from the plate perspective, similar to what Teoscar Hernandez gave us in 2021. I think like the 30 home run, 100 run, 100 RBI. I think that is totally within the range of outcomes for him. I think the only place where you really got to worry is stolen bases and batting average. But at the same time, when you're looking at third base as a whole, you're not really getting that from anybody, especially not the combination of them outside of the top couple of guys like we talked about, Jose Ramirez and Manny Machado. Those are the guys that are going to give you those home runs and steals. There's not really a lot of those guys, and with batting average as well. There's not really many of those guys. I think Chapman's a good fallback option. You don't get one of your elite third basemen, and I would recommend as a whole going for an elite third baseman this season because the position really stinks once you get past Bregman or so. But if you do miss out on those guys, I think Chapman makes a lot of sense. He's going pick 150 and beyond, and he can give you 30 plus homers. I think that he can give you 100 RBIs. That'll be one of my predictions for the season, that he's going to drive in 100 RBIs. And I think that that's probably something we can expect. Even the projections aren't too far off from that. It might be a bit of an upside thought, but I really think he can get there in this lineup. There's not much holding him back. He plays every single day for the most part, 155 games this year, 151 last year. Nothing really not to like there in the profile except for the low batting average, and you're going to have to kind of compensate for that in your drafts, but I would be doing it if you miss out on your Ramirez's and your Machados and your Devers and whatnot.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. One of their big acquisitions in the offseason is Brandon Belt, champion, bringing a champion to town. What can we realistically expect from Belt in Toronto?
Yeah, he's your guy. He's been there for when did he? Was he on all 3 of the World Series teams? I think he missed it.
No, he wasn't on the 2010 team. Pretty sure he was on the 2012 team though.
Yeah, let me see. Yeah, he was on the 2012 and the 2014 rosters. Championship pedigree, which is always great. In 2021, he was insane. 29 home runs. That's what we're kind of hoping for. He batted 274. I think it's going to be kind of tricky here. The projections don't think that he's going to play that much. They're all calling for under 100 games. I think that we're probably going to see somewhere closer to like 110 or so, and it'll end up being closer to an even split between him and Danny Jansen getting those DH at bats, because he's not going to get at bats at first base, really. Vladimir Guerrero, the last 2 seasons combined, has missed 3 games. He's someone that you have to physically remove from games when they want him to have a day off. There's that game from, I forget if it was last year or the year before, where they taped him in the dugout. He had the day off, and they literally had to duct tape him to the bench because he wants to be out there every single day. He's not going to take days off. So Belt's at bats are going to have to mostly come from the DH slot. And I think you can tell me, because you know him better than I do, he can play corner outfield, right? A little bit?
No.
No? Has he?
Not. He's done it a handful of times. It hasn't been pretty, and at this point, with his injury history, he's DH only. He's like strong side platoon DH.
Yeah, and that's where his bats are going to have to come from. And the Jays' DH position is going to be him. It's going to be Danny Jansen, and there might be some lefty-righty stuff going on there. Between the two of them, Belt obviously a left-handed batter. Jansen is a right-handed batter. I think you're probably going to see about 100 games, 15, 17 home runs out of him. And he'll be probably not somebody that you want to be drafted necessarily. But from what I remember, and let me just pull it up again here, he's going pretty late in drafts still. Like, I don't think that he is too bad if you're talking about, a DC just to get some at-bats later on. 359. It's getting a little bit more expensive, but still fairly reasonable if you need a little bit of power later in your drafts to speculate on. Belt has that 20 home run upside, although he's only actually hit 20 home runs once, which kind of surprises me considering, his power. But I think that he can get to close to 20 home runs, especially with the dimensions changing in Toronto. I'm still not sure exactly what those are going to. I think they might have announced it, but until you actually see it in a game, they've moved the walls in the power alleys, I believe, and they've also moved them up as well. I think they're going to be like a couple feet higher, but they're also like 17 feet closer or something. So there's potential for a few more home runs in Toronto for Belt. I think the only thing that might hold him back a little bit is the amount of time he actually plays. But there was something, and I think it was Bubba was telling me that there was a quote from Brandon Belt saying he only wanted to sign somewhere where he was going to play the majority of games. He didn't want to just come on somewhere to be a bench bat. So with all that being said, I think that we'll probably see about 110 pretty solid fantasy relevant games out of Brandon Belt this season. He's a decent target later in DCs.
Yeah. Do we care about Santiago Espinal or Cavan Biggio for fantasy?
Not particularly. It pains me to say, especially with Biggio, because he was a part of that class of Bichette and Guerrero. They all kind of came up together, and Gurriel, I think, was maybe a year ahead of them. But they all kind of came up together, and those other guys just completely blew past Biggio. I think if his name was Kevin Jones or Kevin Smith or Kevin Johnson, and there wasn't that, Hall of Fame father in the background, maybe he wouldn't still be kicking around. Maybe he'd be going back and forth to Buffalo more often than he is to the minor league team. I think that he's probably not somebody that you should be drafted anywhere. Santiago Espinal, I could get behind it. Like, I actually took him in a DC, like 560 range or 570 range, because if something does happen to Merrifield, he's a bit older. If he does get injured or something, Espinal can go in there, and he's not going to be a stud, but at that point of a DC, you're looking for potential for at-bats, and I think he could potentially still play 70, 80 games down the stretch. It really depends on the health, because I don't think they want to start Espinal. He was an all-star last year. He's not like he's terrible or anything like that. But I think that they're kind of moved past the point of wanting to have him be an everyday player. The projections still have him for 500 plate appearances, actually. I don't know where they're going to come from if they are expecting Whit Merrifield to platoon with him a little bit more. I don't think that that's going to happen. I think the games played on the projections are actually kind of crazy here. They're expecting 120, 108, 118. I don't think that we're going to see those at-bats. And even if we do, his game isn't very fantasy friendly. He can give you a handful of home runs, handful of steals, decent batting average. He's not going to hurt you, but he's not going to help you so much really either.
Yeah. Let's move into the starting rotation and let's move into the outfield and talk about George Springer. He had a pretty nice season. I think it was kind of overlooked a little bit. Where are you at on him this year?
I'm somebody who follows this team religiously. I'm wearing a Blue Jays hat right now. Got Blue Jays jerseys in the closet. I would never have thought that he played 133 games last season.
Mm-hmm.
As somebody who watched probably 150 of them, I was shocked when I started going through my off-season prep and seeing that he was out there that much, because you just don't expect it with the way he plays the game. And I think the skill set is unimpeachable. What he does for fantasy, he's going to score you a hell of a lot of runs at the top of that lineup. The power is legit. The speed is legit. It just kind of comes and goes. He stole 14 bases this year, but it was the first time he'd had double-digit steals since 2015. So, I mean, is he going to steal double-digit bases again? The projection system seem to think so. I'm not really 100% sure about that. For me, it's just a matter of how often he's going to be out there. Because the way that George plays the game, and you have to love it as a fan, not so much as a fantasy manager, is I don't want to use the word reckless, but he'll put his body on the line there to make the incredible catch. He'll dive. He'll hit his head on the wall if he needs to make the play. And that's great as a fan of the team, but it also will lead him to miss more games than he probably should because of injuries. You're kind of just hoping that if you have them on your rosters, just let the ball go in the gap. It'll be a double. It'll be fine. And you won't get hurt, essentially. Just chase it down afterwards instead of leaping out for it. That's my main concern with him. Like when he's out there, he's going to be a 25 home run guy. He's going to score potentially 100 runs at the top of that lineup. And he's going to bat somewhere in the 260, 270 range. It's just a matter of, are we going to get the 70 games out of George Springer or closer to what the projections are saying, which is about 130, 140. If he gives you 140 games, no question, I'm all in. And I think the price is fairly reasonable, a little bit past pick 80 right now as well.
I'm right there with you. I love George Springer. I'm a huge fan. I've got the George Springer's bathwater T-shirt. I'm here for the ride again. Health is the only question, and so I'm more likely to draft him in a shallower format than a deeper format just because of that. But ultimately, I just think he's a stud when he's on the field. What about Daulto Varsho? That was the big trade this offseason, sending Gabriel Moreno and Lourdes Gurriel Jr. over to the Diamondbacks for Daulto Varsho. Doesn't sound like he's going to catch very much anymore, but he should play every day in center field, which makes him a really, really interesting catcher-eligible player.
Yeah, I think if you're a dynasty player, you're probably looking at your last year of eligibility for Daulto Varsho. Maybe he sneaks in. I mean, if you're talking like a Yahoo format where I think you just need 5 games for eligibility, I think that there's a chance that he still gets that. If Kirk or Jansen doesn't miss any time, then he will fall into that backup catcher role. And so that maybe you get some more at-bats from him, or maybe you get one more year of eligibility. But he said in Arizona, he doesn't want to catch. He's with a team now that has 2 full-time catchers. So plan accordingly in Dynasty if you need to acquire a catcher, want to trade Varsho, whatever it is. I like him a lot. I think he's very good. I think he might have overperformed a little bit last year, just looking at StatCast. They're not very good, his StatCast numbers. Average exit velocity, 25th percentile. xWOBA, 26th. XBA was 7th percentile. Hard hit was 25th. There's certain things not to like. Like he's quick. He's very good defensively. Like he is, a potential Gold Glove winner defensively. But offensively, I think he might have overachieved a little bit last year, and I'm a little bit worried about him. Now, he's going really high in drafts. He's snuck into the 30s now, where I think he was in the 40s before when he was in Arizona, maybe even in the 50s. But now, these most recent few drafts, he's going 38. 36 is the minimum pick, 41 is the maximum. I think it's a little bit too rich for me. And the catcher position in general sucks, yes. But I don't know that we need to be putting him that high up when I think the skill sets is pretty good. But if he went back to being like an 18 home run guy this year, it wouldn't shock me. The batting average is not going to be good. He shouldn't lack for counting stats in that lineup. But I think we might be overdrafting him simply because of the catcher eligibility when, he's valuable. But would I prefer him over Alejandro Kirk for this coming season? I don't think that I would, especially when you factor in the price. Especially, a lot of it comes to the price. You're going 4 rounds later, like, 1 for 1, who's going to rank higher on a player rater. The steals will probably give it to Varsho, although depending on how high the batting average gets for Kirk, it's probably going to be a lot closer than we think it is. I think that there is room for regression there with Varsho. I wouldn't expect him to I think that was probably a peak fantasy season for him in 2022. And I think that we might be drafting him, expecting it again when the underlying numbers make me a little bit nervous to say that.
Yeah, I can totally understand, especially considering the price, that I probably won't end up with Daulto Varsho. Like, I understand the argument for it because he's going to get so many plate appearances, that he could be extremely valuable. But it's such a hard thing to pull the trigger on, considering depth of catcher is actually pretty decent this year, and that is a huge price to pay for a guy who I think he's still got a little bit of a few flaws in the game. I think he's gonna be great. I do think he is my number 2 catcher off the board, but unless I get J.T. Realmuto, it seems really unlikely I end up with Varsho this year.
He is my number 2 catcher as well, and the Kirk comment is more at price. If you can wait 4 rounds, then I'll take Kirk. You're going to lose steals, you're going to gain batting average. It's a trade-off. Everything else essentially probably going to be a wash. I think you might have a couple more homers from Varsho, but when you're talking a 4-round price difference, give me Kirk.
Yeah. Care about Kevin Kiermaier at all?
No, not for fantasy purposes. I mean, the funny thing is his projection, 10 homers and 10 steals. Generally, that's kind of my cutoff for fantasy relevance. If you give me double-digit homers and steals, I mean, the cutoffs are different depending on the player. But It's the Fangraphs depth chart has him for 10 homers, 10 steals, 228. I don't want him, but I think that there may be some people who end up taking a flyer on him later in drafts. I don't think he's going. Let me just see where he's going. It can't be higher than pick 600. I can't imagine. Let's see, 525 is where he's going. At that price, sure, if you want to just give yourself a couple of steals off the bench later on in your draft, but he's very uninspiring fantasy player. I mean, if he does meet those projections, I guess we'd be pretty happy. But I can't get behind actually pulling the trigger, specifically in a shallow league. Forget about it, no chance. But in a DC, yeah, I could maybe be convinced past pick 500, 550.
There's 0% chance he's on any of my teams this year. Just injury prone, you know, no longer does the things that even when he's on the field that make him that interesting. So let's move into starting rotation. Let's talk about Alec Manoah, who, you know, is coming off of the breakout year. He is a fantastic pitcher. You know, I'm a little surprised he's going as low as he is in the market. I think a lot of it has to do with the projections not loving him. Where are you at on Alec Manoah?
I think the projections are absolutely insane for Manoah. They're expecting him to be, you know, league average or worse than league average. They're calling for like a 4 ERA from the guy when he's only ever been dominant at the major league level. And the pitching indicators don't love him. Your FIPS and your XFIPS and your XERAs, they're a little bit higher than his actual production. Excuse me. And I think a lot of that comes from the fact that he doesn't really strike out that many batters. And those indicators tend to like you more when you're a huge strikeout pitcher. Now, I don't love the fact that his strikeout rate took a bit of a step back. It went from 27% down to 23%. I mean, closer to 28%, really, down to 23. It's not my favorite thing in the world. He also cut his walk rate. And there's something about him that is, you can't really nail it down. He just has that swagger. And I know it's not analytical, and baseball is the most analytical sport. But when you just watch him pitch, there's something about him that you can't really nail down exactly. It's a swagger that you could see in the All-Star game. He was pitching mic'd up. John Smoltz was telling him, throw a fastball here, outside corner. Okay, I'll throw a fastball. Then throw a slider, you know, down at the feet. Okay, I'll throw it. And he would just like so calm and collected at such a huge stage. You know, he's talking to one of the best pitchers of all time. He's talking to a Cy Young winner. He's 25. He was 24 years old at the time. And he goes out there and he strikes out the side while he's got these guys talking in his ear. And I think he did hit a batter in there at the same time, but it doesn't even matter. It just goes to show you the swagger that he has, and it's something that you can't really find on the stat sheet. So will he be a 2.24 ERA guy? I don't think so. But will he be a 4.03 ERA guy like Steamer's projecting? There's no chance I see that he goes over 4. There's something about him when he goes out there, he gives up a run or two in the first inning. That's it for him. He locks himself down. I don't know if he's ever given up more than maybe 4 or 5 runs in a start. And will he have blowups? Yes. But overall, the dude is a stud. And I think that the projections have, you know, thank you projections, because you made it more likely that I'm going to have more Manoah this season. Going to pick 68. I'll take him all day in round 4, round 5, even, you know, potentially push down a little bit farther. I think he's actually gone a little bit the wrong way in terms of ADP. I think he was going earlier 60s. Maybe you know a little bit more. And now he's going late 60s. So maybe he keeps getting pushed down a little bit more. I'll take it every day.
Yeah, I love Alec Manoah. I think he's a top 10 starter, worst top 15 starter. He's not going there right now. I just paired him up with Zach Gallen in a draft where I waited on starting pitching until like the 5th or 6th round. And I feel ecstatic about that start in terms of a draft champions kind of draft. Yeah, I think people are overrating the ERA indicators. He's outpitched those kind of peripherals in the majors, and you know, I mean, he's a stud. Like, if people are going to continue to drop his price, especially with, you know, talk about the fences coming in a little bit in Toronto, like, I'll take the discount every single day of the week.
Yeah.
Kevin Gausman's a guy who, again, is a really, really good pitcher. And I think probably going a little bit too low considering what he's done the last few years. Any worries about Kevin Gausman?
I actually like Gausman a little bit more than Manoah. And it's tricky because I love them both so much. But Gausman last year was elite. He had a 3.35 ERA. And you want to argue if that's elite or not, we can. but he had a 363 BABIP. And I forget, somebody tweeted it out, and I was trying to remember the other day, and I couldn't find the tweet. It might have been Todd Zola, I'm not sure, talking about the worst BABIPs like in history. And if you look at the list, it's all guys from the 1800s for the most part, early part of the 20th century as well. And then you got Kevin Gausman there with a 363 BABIP. It's not going to be that bad. He's a career 314 BABIP with this year factored in, so probably closer to like 300. He was really unlucky, and he was still flat out dominant. His FIP was 238, his XFIP was 275, and the Sierra was 294. Like, I mean, the guy across the board, the indicators loved him. The projections for this upcoming year also tend to love him. And this is where I have a problem with projections, is sometimes I look at them for a player and I love them. Sometimes I hate them, and I don't know if I should really read into them so much. But I think with Gausman, they're probably pretty accurate, if not even a little bit conservative. They think the strikeout rate's going to come down a little bit. The walk rate will go up a little bit. Probably will from 3.9. It was an incredible year in terms of control for him. But I think overall, like, again, another pitcher you're getting past pick 50 here. You're getting him in the 4th round somewhere. Give me Gausman every single day. Like, at this price, I think he should be going probably in like the Scherzer, Cease, Verlander range there, about a round earlier. So you're getting him fairly discounted. And as a side note, right beside him, Zach Wheeler also at 55. What are we doing? I mean, these guys, like, there's a lot of value in these pitchers a little bit down the board. There's no need to reach early when you got guys like Gausman and Manoah. You could maybe go back-to-back with them. 56 for Gausman right now, 68 for Manoah. You could go for Gausman in the 5th and Manoah in the 6th potentially, and I would be very happy to do so. You might get 30 wins between them, potentially.
Yeah, I'm right there with you on Gausman. Love him this year. Jose Berrios really, really struggled last year. I mean, completely fell apart. He'd have moments in which he looked like a guy that could kind of reclaim the past glory, but then would fall apart again. Any chance you're buying back in on a rebound for Jose Berrios?
I'll buy in at the price, sure. I mean, he's going around pick 250 right now. If people were expecting a rebound at a higher price, then no, I probably wouldn't be in on him. But I think considering the price, considering the track record, we know that he's not as bad as he was this past season. Like, he had a 5.23 ERA, which was just horrible. But if you look at his career, you're looking at 389, 384, 368, 4 on the dot, 352. Like, he's a guy who got Cy Young votes in 2021. I don't think we can write him off. It was a horrible year. And I think that part of it, too, is the overall numbers are inflated by the blow-up starts. Like, as a whole, he wasn't terrible, I say cautiously, because, I mean, he was terrible. But there are certain starts out there. Like, he gave up 8 earned runs against Cleveland close to the end of the season. He gave up 8 against Milwaukee. He gave up 6 in Chicago against the White Sox, 6 against the Angels, 6 against Cleveland again. When it was bad, it was really bad. And when it was good, it was really, really damn good. He's had a 7-inning, 13 strikeout game against Minnesota. He had a 6-inning, 13 strikeout game against the Phillies. Like, there were times when he really showed it last year, and I don't think we can be fully out after one bad season. I think it's a classic buy low scenario on him. You're getting him at pick 244 right now. Like, he is going, let me just see in terms of overall starting pitchers. He might be outside the top 100. Oh, he's the 98th pitcher off the board this year when it's factoring in starters and relievers. I think it's a good bargain. Not that I'm going to be pushing him up draft boards or taking him on every team or anything, but sprinkling in a little bit of Berrios at this range of your draft, hoping for a bounce back, he's going right around the range where you can take him with the last pick of your 12-teamer. And at that point, I think you buy in.
What about Chris Bassitt? Had a good couple of years in Oakland and then pitched well in New York, and now he's in Toronto on a free agent deal. Are you buying in on Chris Bassitt?
I'll buy in on Chris Bassitt. Yeah, he's going more expensive than Berrios is. I think he's in the 150 on the dot actually right now. But I think we've seen over the last couple of years exactly what he is. He's not going to blow you away with the strikeouts. He's just a consistently fairly high-level pitcher. He's not in that elite tier, but he's going to give you somewhere in the mid-3s for ERAs. Like, if you just look at the last few seasons, going back to 2018, 302, 381, 229, 315, and 342. And obviously that 229 was in the short year. But he's still been fairly consistently elite for 5 seasons now. The indicators are always a little bit higher, but when you see the indicators higher year after year, you kind of have to say, okay, there's something that they're missing a little bit with Bassitt. And I think part of it is, like we mentioned earlier with Manoah, he doesn't have crazy high strikeout numbers, so the FIPS and the XFIPS of the world are not going to be crazy on him. But at the same time, He's consistent. He's going to get a lot of wins pitching for this team. And, the ballpark is definitely a factor here. We don't know exactly what these dimension changes are going to do, but I don't expect it to have too much of an impact on Chris Bassitt. His home runs allowed are not crazy high. He's allowing less than a homer per 9. I don't think that that's going to change too much in Toronto. So give me Chris Bassitt all day at pick 150 here. I think that you could make an argument that you could take all these members of the Blue Jay rotation, with maybe the exception of Yusei Kikuchi or somebody like that. You take those top 4 guys where they're going, and maybe you don't want to have that much invested in one team. But I think that all the Blue Jay starters are pretty reasonably priced this year.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I've always been a Bassitt guy, and I think there might be a little bit step back for him in Toronto, considering the turf, considering maybe change in dimensions. But I don't think he's going to fall off completely. I think he's going to be a very valuable pitcher considering where he's going. Do we care about Yusei Kikuchi at this point?
I mean, you want to, because you see the strikeout numbers that he's able to put out. And even, last year, I think it was the month of June, where he was just really, really damn good. And you're thinking, okay, maybe he does have something here. There's potential for him. He strikes out close to 30% of batters, 27%. Okay, maybe not quite close to 30. It's just a matter that he has no control. He walked 13% of batters this year. His blowups, Berrios' blowups were bad, but Kikuchi's were historically bad. This guy was just really terrible. He lost his job, and rightfully so, to Mitch White and a couple other spot starters throughout the year. I can't really be in on him. I just think that, there is potential, but I'm not really willing to take the chance of, going through the bumps with this guy. And the price on him, let's just see where he's going right now. He's going after pick 500. So, I guess you could take a chance on him and it wouldn't kill you. But I don't really want – and you're taking him after pick 500, you're in a draft champions or a draft and hold. And then you have to hold him the entire season. I don't really know that I want to do that with him. There is potential for a bit of a turnaround. He was an all-star a year ago, 2021. But I just don't want him on any of my teams this year.
Yeah, me neither. I think there's a reasonable chance he ends up in the bullpen at some point, especially with that walk rate and homer rate. All right, let's move into the bullpen. Jordan Romano has turned into an absolute stud. Are you drafting him such?
Oh, yeah. Jordan Romano, for me, is one of the best closers you can take. He's going after pick 40, and I think that's pretty reasonable. If you don't want to pay up for those guys in the second round, your Clases and your Diaz's, and I think Josh Hader he's just outside of the second round right now. I would take Romano in the third pretty comfortably. If you're talking a 12-teamer, you might even go into the fourth round range here. He is every bit as good as those other guys, I think. And he doesn't get probably as much attention as them, because being in Toronto, I don't think you're going to get as much attention in general. But he is a stud. He is an absolute stud. He gets massive strikeout numbers. Again, there's confidence there with him that doesn't – it does show up in the stat sheets. The stats are incredible, but there's also something to seeing him in Toronto every day, that he's got something that they don't nail down. He is better than what he gave you this year, which was, I think it was a 3.30 something ERA. Or no, sorry, it wasn't. I'm looking at the xERA. His ERA was 2.11. The xERA was 3.30.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's honestly probably better than what these indicators are telling you. I don't know that he's going to be a 2.11, 2.15 ERA guy like he's been the last couple of years, but he is in that elite tier of closers for me. There is no break between Diaz and Clase and Hader and Romano. I think he's right there, lockstep with them.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I think he's an absolute stud. Pretty easy guy to draft if you're into the early closers. If he goes down for some reason, we have seen, have some injury issues that have popped up, in recent years. Who would be the next guy up?
I'm guessing Yimi Garcia. It could be Swanson. I just think that they're probably going to go with the guy that they know first. So I think they'll probably be Garcia. I wouldn't be shocked if Anthony Bass gets a couple of save opportunities as well. And the new guy, Eric Swanson, he's somebody who is I don't know how to feel about him, because he had an incredible season this past year, Eric Swanson. The couple of years before that, and we're not talking about a lot of innings here. In total, we're talking about probably 100-ish innings. But they weren't great. They weren't what he gave you last year, which was a 1.68 ERA, a 1.85 FIP, crazy strikeout numbers. He did it for one season. I don't know that I'm going to be expecting him to repeat that. If he gets, if Romano goes down, if you need to, pick up somebody, speculate on, obviously things will be clear when the season begins. But I think it'll probably be Yimi Garcia, given that he's got that closing experience where Swanson really, he has a couple of saves in his career. He's got 6 saves. but I think that they're probably going to throw that role to Garcia initially to see if he can do it because he's done it in the past.
All right. That's going to wrap us up for this episode. Joe, thank you so much for joining me.
Justin, it's been great spending the afternoon with you. It's always a blast. Can't wait to do it again soon. On my show, we'll get you on soon. We'll talk some Giants or we'll talk whatever. We'll figure it out later on, but always a blast being on with you, man.
Yeah, I can't wait to talk to you again. Remind everybody where you can reach on social media and plug all your work.
Yeah, I'm at Joe Orrico 99. You guys can check me out there. Also at sportsethos.com. And check out the podcast, Fantasy MLB Today, wherever you get your shows. We're doing previews right now. We're doing rankings. We're doing mock drafts. A lot of fun stuff leading up to the season. It's crazy to think, but it's just about February. Baseball starts pretty much next month. Once February 1st hits, we can say baseball's next month. It's right around the corner. A lot of fun, Justin, though. Thank you for having me on, man.
It's an absolute pleasure. 60 days away from opening day. Wow. Let's go. You can reach me on Twitter at Justin Mason FWFB. Email me the show, friendsoffantasybenefits@gmail.com. Almost done with these 30 team previews in 30 days. Only one team left to go tomorrow for the Oakland A's. So that one should be about 30 seconds or 45 seconds long. Definitely read all my work over on Fangraphs, where I'm writing daily on here, the Sleeper and the Bust, and TGFBI podcast. For Joe and myself, thank you for listening. Have a fantastic baseball offseason.